Hey, everybody, it's Richard Harris and Scott Leese with another episode of the Surf and Sales podcast brought to you by Salesforce Revenue Cloud, Lead 411, and Gong.io. We appreciate all of our sponsors. And of course, if you're trying to grow your revenue, by all means, you should be looking at tools like this, as well as this tool that we're going to introduce. And I know he hates it when I do this, but I'm doing it anyway, which is why we have Dr. Jeremy Donovan here, who is the SVP of sales, what? Sales strategy at Salesloft, right? Another awesome tool that we like and love. So shout out to Salesloft and Kyle and the crew over there. Jeremy, thanks for coming on. Dr. Donovan, that'll be the last time I say it unless Scott says it. So.
I appreciate that. Although I'm not an official PhD, so I do not deserve the designation. And maybe that's something we'll get into as well.
Well, actually, let's, what do you think about the people who have doctorates in sales? Let's talk about it.
I mean, I think it's cool. We have a Dr. Fowler, so Dr. Sean Fowler at Salesloft, and I believe I'm not exactly sure what his degree is in, probably something like organizational psychology. I think that's legit. I actually dropped out of a PhD program now, 25, 30 years ago. So I don't know if it's actually a regret that I dropped out. It was the late 90s in Silicon Valley. So it was a much better to be working and it depends on what you want to do in life, but it was much better for me to be working than earning a PhD at that point.
I was going to say it's cash in versus cash out, right?
Yeah, I think that's probably a good way to look at it. I mean, I was super junior, obviously, so I was not. There wasn't so much cash coming in, but I still was pretty hungry to work and create. I didn't have the patience.
Was the PhD going to be in electrical engineering?
It was, yeah. So my background is semiconductor physics. So that's what I was doing.
Yeah. So I want to start here. So how does somebody with semiconductor physics and academia make their way into sales? This is a non-typical background for somebody to be in sales, to say the least.
Yeah, there's a few of us out there, and a sidebar thing, which is I've also noticed former attorneys who are now chief revenue officers. So I've seen that pattern too. For me, the journey was very, very nonlinear. I would have never expected to become a salesperson other than selling mangoes on the side of the road in Florida when I was a kid, or baseball cards at baseball card shows. I don't even know if those exist anymore with eBay around, but I used to sell things all the time. But I never thought I'd be a salesperson. I was quite introverted and probably still am to some extent, though I can become a social ambivert, I suppose. But for me, it was, I moved from engineering into being an industry analyst. And that was kind of a good mix for me because I love technology, but I also love business. And then over the years, I went into more and more strategy roles. And what happened and how I found myself into sales is because different parts of organizations have over time become much more analytical. So I got put in as a CMO, even though I had almost no marketing background in a, $2-ish billion revenue company. And the reason was because this was the era when CMOs were switching over from people who came from the creative side, and creative in that world means like brand and design and so on, into demand gen related people. So, I could calculate the ROI of anything. And so that's why they put me in that role. And then the same thing after that transformation happened for marketing, it's now happening for sales, which drew me, right? I think these problems that can be solved, with humans and with machines are absolutely fascinating in sales. So that's how I ended up over here.
Now you've been in both the VP of marketing seat and the VP of sales seat. I'm going to force you to not sit on the fence. And I want to know which role was harder for you to deal with personally.
Definitely the sales side, right? On the marketing side, I mean, it's a bit, there's this fundamental tension that exists for a reason, which is that sales teams are almost by necessity very short-term focused, right? The month, the quarter, maybe even the year. And marketing teams are, yes, they're responsible for demand generation, but they're not, depends on the company. If there's a PLG, product led growth, and PQL sort of company, then they're super responsible, but that's more rare. I think that's more the exception than the norm. But yeah, on the marketing side, right, and as I said, there's just sort of fundamental tension that exists for a reason. You're investing in the brand long term, right? You're softening the beaches for the salespeople, and that is not this month necessarily or this quarter. It's like this year, next year, and the year after that. So I think I felt as though the sales thing was harder because when I was the first head of sales job, and now I'm sales strategy means I'm the right hand of the CRO, so it's a lot less stress for me. When I was actually a head of sales, I was working in a business that was very transactional in that first role where I had that. And we had a dashboard that showed sales by the minute, and we had comps by the minute. So that was super stressful.
Wow.
Scott, you would have thrived there, Scott. Like you would have loved that.
Yeah, 15 years ago, I would have loved that.
Right.
I love these kind of things that drive me absolutely insane. I'm a masochist in this particular way.
We had, I mean, just to date the time, and maybe it still exists, but we shipped tons and tons of catalogs. We had a 200-person call center in the Adirondacks in upstate New York that I would go up to regularly. So it's just a very different kind of business than you run into that much of these days.
What made you want to go from marketing to sales, right? Again, to your point, you were certainly, you had a business mind from your upbringing, right? You apparently liked it, right? You apparently liked making money. You dropped out of the PhD because you wanted to make money, like you're money motivated to some degree. And you go to marketing. What made you want to transition from marketing to sales?
Yeah, I'll answer that question, but money motivated, it's like, I would say I'm learning motivated. When I take those tests, I'm super learning motivated. So I've always felt like if I learn, then the money will follow. Right. I also, right, have every advantage, right. I have a stable-ish middle-class upbringing. I'm a 6'5" Caucasian male, had the luxury of going to an Ivy League school. Like I had every luxury. So I don't discount all of those things that, were rights of birth. So anyway, with that aside, why sales? So I moved into this, I have this +1 thing, the way I've managed my career, right? Which is the following. I would add a word and drop a word. So I was a semiconductor engineer. I dropped the engineer and added analyst. So semiconductor analyst. And then I added sort of product development with the analyst thing as I dropped the semiconductor. So it was, or as I dropped the analyst thing. So I was a semiconductor product development. And then I moved into product management, product marketing. I dropped product in there and was corporate marketing. And then I dropped the corporate thing and I was CMO, and then I was CMO plus head of sales. So I was always like adding a thing. So in this case, it was, I was marketing first at that point, and I was handed revenue responsibility. So it became, I guess, what is a true CRO. And I fell in love with the sales side. I was not expecting it at all. I was always kind of intimidated before that about sales. And then I found out that, hey, wow, there's this incredible world of sort of analytical refinement that can be added to sales. And then I dropped the revenue, the sort of daily revenue responsibility that I had. And I just moved, but I moved into the sales strategy role, which I've been doing for, I don't know, 5-10 years now. And I love it. Like, I don't want to be anything else until I retire. And then maybe I'll be like a high school math and science teacher, but I'm not trying to I don't want to get promoted. I don't want to change jobs. Like, just keep me head of sales strategy, and I'm in my happy place.
What, for people who might not know, or who are envious of this mood that you're now in, where everything is perfect and you don't want to
you got a sales role that has no number requirement.
Yeah, has no quota. Yeah. What does the right hand of the CRO do?
Yeah. By the way, I'll say, like, I'm at the same risk the CRO is, although I did survive, one CRO turnover. But I'm at mostly the same risk, because if they don't succeed, there's a very easy finger to point as to like why that's not happening. How did I happen into this role? There's not, I mean, there's a few of us out there, right? You know, a few of us out there who
But what does the role actually do? I would venture that not that many people know what the day-to-day looks like of an SVP of sales strategy.
Yeah.
And as you called it, the right hand of the CRO.
Yeah. So
what is the role?
Oftentimes, like we have another quote unquote day job. So for instance, my other part of, and I'll talk about the sales strategy thing, but the other part of my day job was like running sales development. Or I started up the sales engineering team. At one point I ran sales ops. So you often have sort of those other pieces. What sales strategy is think about, right? CROs are responsible for whatever the month, the quarter, whatever the 6 months, whatever your sales cycle is. And they don't have the time necessarily to like re-architect territory strategy or re-architect compensation plans or re-architect account prioritization, or you like whatever it is, things that are retooling the infrastructure of the way the sales organization operates, roles and responsibilities, career paths, like all those types of things, sales methodologies, sales processes, right? Those are things that it's not a great use of the CRO's time necessarily to work on building the skeleton out. So that's the job, right? Is it's a consulting job. It's basically an internal consulting job where you're focused on the people, process, and technology that will improve sales productivity.
Scott, do you see that, Scott, as, like JM, right? Like, is that kind of what JM would do? Or now that you hear that, oh, that's what that would have been like the next level.
Actually, the first thing I thought of is that's what I do now in my job, just for a half dozen to a dozen companies at once, rather than internally for one large organization.
Finally, Scott tells me what he does. He's never been able to articulate it well.
Technically, Jeremy told you what I do.
I know, and it's a shame you can never tell me. So finally, we have an answer.
But I'm with you. Like, I do think that this could be like a fractional job sometimes, right? That one could do this for a number of companies, and I guess that's what that's what you're doing. You're a fractional head of sales strategy for 6 companies. I think that's definitely is a doable thing.
I want to ask you a tactical thing, because I hear this all the time. If you're gonna revamp territories, right? Where do you even start? Like, that's something I've never had to do. I think it's not something it's written about, right? Unless you've written about it somewhere, right? Like, it would be a great ebook for sure.
My take is it's definitely not written about. There is no like codified universal way, do it like this. So I'm very curious in this because I've had to do it a few times.
Yeah, I read a book a week at least, and plenty of those are sales books. And I can say I don't really think that there's anything out there. I mean, the closest stuff maybe is on sales strategy is probably the stuff that the Alexander Group puts out on compensation. So yeah, there's not really anything. So I have this flow chart that basically is a whole series of decisions. I guess I should put this in an ebook or just put it out there somewhere, which says like, are you inside sales or outside sales? Is the motion different by industry? Is the motion different by geography? Is the motion different by this, that, or the other thing? But it's like, what is the context that you are selling into? And then based on that, right, you decide, what is territory? Like, territory can be size, territory can be geo, territory can be industry, territory can be whatever, right? Product related. So you have all these different dimensions, but let's assume you got that context. I think that maybe the deeper question you're asking is, okay, if you're going to move, and this is another piece, right? Which is, are you an assigned account, or are you like open, within a particular whatever geo size industry combination? But I think part of the root of the question you're asking, I think this is the hardest thing, is let's say you are in an assigned account world and you decide to shift the accounts of AEs. That's a big deal. Like that is a destroy. If you get it wrong, you destroy the company's growth, kind of thing. I think that's the riskiest thing I do, frankly. Like, I think you can monkey around with compensation and whatever, it's not really going to make a huge difference. But if you mess up territories, you're gonna truly affect the livelihoods of of individuals as well as the company. So for me, the way I do it is, and this is sort of the technical thing, is that I actually created algorithm sounds like a fancy thing, but I wrote some code that builds equal potential. First, it scores accounts by potential, and then it distributes those accounts to build equal potential territories subject to like whatever geo size industry constraints. So it truly builds out.
Do you end up with a map that looks like, gerrymandering of territories? Like, does
it
look
can,
all,
yeah. I mean, not because I don't like I wouldn't do that with physical territory, right? Because if people are truly traveling, you got to be careful with travel distance. But I think from a industry size, whatever geo thing, when you're doing that, yes, it does look like gerrymandering for sure. If you were to be able to visualize that.
So here's what I've heard. There's an amazing book. There's a new SaaS platform that Jeremy needs to develop that everybody would, buy this algorithm for, right? Like, Jeremy, not that Kyle's going to listen to this, and tell you to quit, but
it's unfortunate that Jeremy just wants to stay in his current seat forever because
he doesn't need a title. He doesn't want to go be a founder.
We've already created a couple projects for you.
Right.
I may be super naive about this, but a lot of the stuff I built is infrequent use stuff, right? Like territory assignment. Yes, we have an insane algorithm for account scoring and an insane algorithm for account assignment, but it's hard to sell because people only use it once a year, or twice a year.
Fair enough. But there's something there, dude. Like there's something, this is the infrastructure behind the infrastructure, right?
Yeah.
Like this is the pieces that make up the chip that Intel builds or Apple builds, right? Like, you become the Foxconn of the sales operations world, right? So I do have, shoot, I forgot what it was. Go ahead, Scott. Go for it.
Oh, while you're doing that, though, I was going to add,
at least I'm not on mute. There you go.
No.
I didn't go on mute.
While you're doing that, I was going to add, there is a bunch of stuff we built out. I mean, and I do wish stuff existed. Like I would have bought a territory platform if it existed. I would have bought an account scoring platform if what I was looking for existed. Yeah. And there is stuff out there, but it's like, it misses key parts that are really, really important. And did it with forecasting. Like we wanted to do something a little next generation with forecasting. So we built our own forecasting algorithm.
So that's what I mean. Like there's this whole thing of territory and forecasting. There's this whole thing I know what my question was actually. Did you guys adjust territories because of COVID at all?
No, we didn't. We adjusted capacity because we got spooked. As I think was reasonable to do. It's funny. I think it depends on when people's quarters ended. Like if you were on a traditional quarter, then you did one thing. And we were we're on the Salesforce kind of quarter schedule. So, we did another thing, but we got a bit spooked, reduced capacity a little bit. And then in some ways regretted that because not only do we have to let go of good people, but we immediately started hiring back because we didn't experience, the hiccup. I mean, if anything, everyone sent their sellers home and they needed accountability, right? And to be able to make sure people were, especially the field sellers were taking action. So no, we didn't make an adjustment. We've stuck with our schedule, which is in our enterprise business, we redo territory once a year on February 1st. And then in our SMB world, we redo territory twice. We do it February 1st and August 1st. So every 6 months.
That's really interesting. I've never heard of somebody redoing territories 1 or 2 times a year like that in a regular cadence. I've heard of it in a reactionary type way, but not so much proactive. That's really interesting.
What's the advantage there? What do you guys see? And then my second question to that is, does the sales team get annoyed?
Yeah, good set of questions. The first thing is, one of the reasons we do it is fresh eyes. It's like I learned this from one of our he was an SDR, he was an SDR leader, and when I was running sales development, he was working for me, a guy named Colin Waldrop, and he said fresh eyes, and I said no, it shouldn't matter. Like it's the same accounts. Why does it matter? He said, trust me. And he was spot on. So I think just getting a fresh set of eyes on the accounts.
So what did you without giving away, what kind of things did you notice because it was a fresh set of eyes to do it?
It's just accounts that had been, quote unquote, DQ'd for whatever reason by the previous salesperson look attractive to the next salesperson.
Mhm.
And in truth, right, the companies have changed. Some have grown, some have, added Microsoft Dynamics or Salesforce or whatever, right? Like just things change. So with that fresh set of eyes, people are much more willing to engage the accounts. And then to answer your second question about salespeople, yeah, when we first started doing it a few years back, they were terrified, and we really we went through a sort of pilot rounds of here's what your accounts are going to look like, here's how the algorithm is working, until they sort of felt comfortable. And then our then CRO, I think, had kind of the master stroke insight, which is this concept of a holdback. So we let every rep hold back not a ton of accounts, 5 to 10 accounts that this basically is in their territory. They're like, these accounts won't move no matter what. And if you allow them to hold back 5 or 10 accounts, that solves, 90%
That was my
of
next.
the problem.
I was going to ask if you allowed I call them holdovers, but
Yeah.
like what do you? And then did you say, okay, you get these holdovers for 60 days, 90 days, forever? Like, how did you guys handle it?
No, if you have a holdover, you get to keep it. If again, in SMB, you get to keep it at least for 6 months, and you can reclaim it as a holdover 6 months later. Or in enterprise, you can keep it for a year. But otherwise, otherwise everything else is subject to moving. We do have some other rules, for example, and we intentionally, because AEs will game the system. Like we have some other rules that say if there's open ops of a certain type, and age on the account, then you get to keep it. If there's sufficient activity of a certain type and volume, then you get to keep it. But we keep that, that sort of a heavily guarded secret in the vault, so that they don't spend their time gaming the system.
Got it. Cool. Scott, what else you got?
Yeah. Richard, I have a question for you, and then it comes back to Jeremy. When you think of the phrase, hey, salespeople, what do you think of, Richard?
Jeremy Donovan and his podcast. That's the right answer. Oh, you want the real answer.
That's where I was going. Jeremy's strategy. Go ahead, try to take a look right now, Richard. If you look at Jeremy's LinkedIn posts, almost every single one of them starts off with, hey, salespeople. I want to know from Jeremy, like, when did that start? And how did you decide to stick with that, intro or I don't even know what you call it.
It is his brand.
I know. So how did you land on that as like Jeremy's brand, Jeremy's thing?
Yeah. So I used to be really torn about whether I would post on LinkedIn. Well, first of all, I was super late to LinkedIn. I'll start by saying that. So, and ditto the Clubhouse thing. I'm not on Clubhouse yet. I don't even have an iPhone, so I guess I can use that as an excuse. But I'm very late to all social media things. So I was kind of late to LinkedIn, and I was very tortured about whether I would post stuff to a blog or to LinkedIn. And I finally came to the following decision, and it was assisted, the decision. I'll tell you about the assistance piece, but all long form content I post to a blog at sellingsherpa.com. And that blog is really more for me than for anyone else. I mean, it gets some traffic, but I don't try to actually drive any traffic there. And it's mostly me reading books and summarizing books. And then every once in a while I'll do a survey. So I'll post the survey findings there. So all the long form stuff is there. And then on LinkedIn, I do all the short form stuff. So if it's in a post, I put it in a post. If it's going to be an article, I do it on the blog. And why hey salespeople? So there's two reasons. The first is I do a ton of my own data science. We also have a data science team. And I found out that if you use hey and then the person's first name as opposed to hi, hello, not using anything, then that at the time, and it decreases over time, but that at the time had a much higher response rate. So I thought, hey, I had just discovered that. I probably say hey a lot anyway, although it's hard to remember now one way or the other. And so I just did hey salespeople. So that was where that came from. But then the idea of what I do is I try to post every day, but I won't unless the following is true, that I have either a quote from a book I believe in or a actionable sales statistic from a study that I've done, or a study that Salesloft has done, or a study, frankly, that anyone has done, even competitors. Like if they've got good data, I post it. And it's got to be like 1 or 2 sentences, always with source attribution, sample sizes, and so on. And I have this whole, I wrote it down somewhere. I don't know if I ever published it or not, but I have this manifesto of what I will and will not do. And those are some of the things. And then in my not do is, I won't post anything that's not related to sales, period, ever, no matter what. I'm sure I violated that. I almost violated it yesterday, and I said, nope, does not fit the manifesto. And I won't post on topics. This is sort of related, but I won't post on topics like leadership, even though I care about leadership. It's just not sales.
Yeah, but why limit yourself? I like Scott and I are sitting here grinning as we watch you, like, but people need to know about leadership, and you clearly have a really unique perspective. You have a thoughtful
I'm wrestling with
perspective.
the statement, leadership is not sales.
Right.
Well, sales leadership is sales, and I do post on sales leadership, but I don't post on kind of general management leadership. I geek out on that stuff too, absolutely. And I read a ton of like non-sales related business books. Yet I don't post on that stuff. Partly is because, I mean, most of the stuff I do for me, but partly it's because I want people to feel as though if they see something I post, that it is predictably high quality and predictably on point, that I don't drift.
Yeah, but
so that is a brand, I guess, right?
That is a brand, and there's some people who believe in that. I know there's one person I think of in particular who's always preaching like, stay in your lane, basically. Talk only about this one niche and never deviate. And I remember a couple years ago, somebody kind of critiquing me and saying, man, you post all over the place about all this different kind of stuff, so I don't know what I'm going to get. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want you to know what you're going to get from me. I don't want to be predictable. So there's no one right way. I just find it fascinating that your strategy has evolved this particular way. I'll ask you this, because you said, you're late to the game on LinkedIn and all these different platforms and whatnot. Do people need to proactively create, work on, and own their own brand, regardless of role these days?
I think it is super role dependent. I forgot which book it was, but there's this one author who's pretty sales author, great sales author, who's pretty adamant that SDRs, salespeople should not build LinkedIn kind of brands, because that's not a good use of their time, right? Like the reason, maybe it was Jason Jordan or someone like that, I can't recall, but because they're much better off using their time selling than filming videos and brand building and whatever. I tend to, in some ways, I tend to agree with that. I mean, I guess if you're going to build a brand, if let's say you're selling to, I don't know, CFOs or something into finance, and you're a salesperson, if you're staying in your lane of like legit finance advice, I guess go for it. But no, I don't think everyone needs to do it. It's frankly, it's pretty exhausting. The last 3 weeks, I don't know when this podcast will air, but the last 3 weeks I've been, and I go into these modes where I'm actually not posting very often. And those times, what you can bet is at the end of those 3 or 4 week cycles, like something in my, big in my world is coming. So the thing I've actually been working on in the last 3 weeks is we built a quarterly business review generator for our SDR team. So not actually our CSMs, our customer success managers. So literally they just put in an account ID, and then out pops a QBR slide deck with, automatically everything that they need. So, we saved they would spend hours on those QBR decks. So that's like internal auto magic. But or externally, right? I went into a hole and came out of that hole with emailgrader.com and subjectlinegrader.com and stuff like that. So I will disappear into a hole periodically for very, very deeply focused work, and then come out of it with something that hopefully has an impact.
I want all those things. Like I have clients who'd be like, yep, I'll take that one. I'll take that one. It's like, it's almost like a SaaS buffet platform, right? You just pay by whatever you pick up off the buffet this week. Right?
Yeah,
It's like iTunes for, you want to use the subject line thing this week? That's 99 cents. You want to use the territory thing? That's $4.99.
But back to the brand building thing, like it's exhausting, right? You guys know, I mean, it's exhausting to keep up with this stuff.
I don't find it exhausting.
I
find it's time consuming. It's not necessarily exhausting for me. I have I've gotten better at like, okay, just if I can't get to something today, don't post it. Like I'm getting better about that, where I used to sort of post all the time and Scott would get on me. But I also think salespeople do need to do it.
Richard is out here posting at like 9 p.m. and shit. It's like,
that's not true.
You should know better than that by now. But I find it exhausting actually to continuously feel like I have to create something new and unique and valuable. And if I don't, I'm going to disappear into oblivion. That I find exhausting. And so I've actually said to, I can't remember who, maybe it was to Richard. I've actually said before, you'll know that I've made it when I quit LinkedIn. When I can quit dealing with that and dealing with putting content out there, then you'll know I've made it and I'm more or less retired. So I'm with Jeremy, especially if you have a post that like lights on fire and you get, thousands of notifications. Like I won't post for days after that because it takes me days to clean everything up after I've had something like that. So
it's drifting a little bit. But I almost wish, like, I really don't want to care, right? I don't want to care how many likes and views and blah, blah, blah there is, because I really do think I post for me. And it's because my memory is not great. So I joke that I have a good CPU, but I have like terrible hard disk drive. So for me, I do the posting and the blogging so I can actually go back and look back at, oh my God, okay, that's what I was researching. And this is what I found. Or if I like or share something, it's because I thought this is a killer piece of content and I want to be able to go back and refer to it.
So you think that SDRs and salespeople shouldn't be focusing on their, maybe not necessarily a full brand, but on LinkedIn that much? Or you like, no, they really can, but not so in a different way?
I'm super data driven, right? So I've done a lot of studies on hiring, for example, what biographical data matters about whether or not someone's going to be successful. The other thing I've done is I've interviewed, I'll go and I'll ask people whenever I'm talking to, anyone, I'll say, who's the best salesperson in your company? And I ask that routinely. I keep a Google sheet called best AEs. And I've got this long list of the best AEs, and I go and talk to those people and I try to figure out what they do. And I can tell you, here's what they do. They are absolutely maniacally focused on the job. They know the next step for every customer in their account. They are able to nudge. I guess that's the challenger sale kind of concept, which is less about challenging, less about bringing necessarily a new idea. Of course they do, but it's more about, okay, if this customer is stuck because they're psychologically stuck on the deal, they know how to nudge people forward. But in talking to these, I'm trying to think of a single example of the number one AE in the company. I'm trying to think of a single example where that person was a quote unquote LinkedIn influencer, thought leader, what have you. They just say no. In fact, I reached out to yesterday. I had asked someone who was top AE. I invited them from a company, and I invited them to the podcast. And they're like, "Nope, I'm not going to make any. She's not going to make any more money going on the podcast." So she's like, "Nope, not going to do it."
Yeah. See, I mean, we could argue about this for hours on end. I fundamentally disagree with it. I think a lot of it has to do with somebody's temperament and their desire to be an employee for the rest of their lives, or to eventually cross over and become an employer and work for themselves and harness that entrepreneurial spirit. because that person who said that to you is so correct if all they want to do is sit in a chair and make phone calls and make other people millions of dollars while they get nice startup t-shirts. If they want to do more than that, then they're killing themselves by not actively building their brand and starting that process of increasing the size of their network, putting their thoughts out there in whatever forum makes sense, and figuring out new and creative ways to monetize it. So I think a lot of it is temperament, is what does somebody want to do with themselves and their lives. I don't know that you have to do it or you don't have to do it. I think it depends on what you want to do.
I'm with you. I mean, I would say that you're like, in some of the language you used to use, you're applying some of your own subconscious bias to what is good from a value perspective and not good from a value perspective. Right. And what I mean by that is, we as a society have begun to say that like someone who follows an entrepreneurial path is somehow a better path. Like if they're a successful entrepreneur, that's a better path than like leading a life as an individual, even as an individual contributor, right, for the long term within a company. But like I'll take my father,
because I think we associate the locus of control over your life and the freedom and flexibility part with working for yourself, as opposed to somebody.
I mean, I'll give you an anecdotal example. So as much as I'm a statistician, I'm going to go the opposite direction here, which is sometimes the one trumps the example of the many. So my father-in-law was he's retired now. So the was is not past tense on the planet, but he was a mechanical engineer, and he designed cooling systems for power plants, conventional and nuclear power plants. And they offered him promotion after promotion after promotion. And I'm sure he could have gone out as an independent consultant anytime he wanted to. And he said, no, 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 no. And like, he's one of my role models for someone who has lived a contented life. Right. And over the course of, 40 years, and he loved going into work. He loved what he was doing. He knew what he wanted. He was able to, save and provide for his child. And, he's one of the most content people I know. And I think so it depends on what your goals are, right? So he had achieved those goals with one path. And, for me, I've thought off and on about starting a company, but at this point, again, like I like being the right hand of someone else. It's a weird thing, but I like to do that. And then when I retire, I'll become a teacher.
But that's exactly what Scott said. Like if someone wants to be an individual contributor and focus on that and just be that, I think, maybe you got turned off by the startup t-shirt collector, but, then that's good. Right. But salespeople are often ambitious, not always. They're definitely people who like to be, look, they want to carry a bag. My dad was this. He owned an insurance company, co-owned it, and sold his half because he just didn't want to deal with the management side of stuff. There are plenty of salespeople that way that I think are awesome. And I love that, and to that person's point, then they don't need to be on LinkedIn. I can support that argument.
The two best salespeople at Salesloft, like year after, I mean, it varies, right? But year after year after year, number one and number two, they alternate places. Neither of them have a LinkedIn presence at all. And neither of them have any interest whatsoever in becoming a sales manager, because they're going to make 5 times what they make, being in hyper accelerators than they would as in management.
That's great. Like I don't, again, that, and they'll always be able to get a job for that reason.
Yep.
Right. That's different than those who have different levels of ambition. Right. Look, at some point, and we can talk about this, although we're running out of time, is, like you guys are going IPO soon, right? Like you can talk about it, right? No, I'm just kidding.
I can't talk about it.
No, you can't talk about it. I don't even know if you are.
Then I'm not going to have my job if I do that.
Right. Then, those top 2 reps, they may decide to stay, they may decide to go, right? Again, depending on what their status is, they, may be able to retire. But, it's an interesting conversation because I think people should be doing it more often And that is a reason I would support them not doing it.
Yeah,
I've heard that argument before too. This like, oh, because that person's going to make 5x more. Yep. For how long? And this is the conversation that I had with my friend who was making 5x more than me, who said to me, "You're an idiot for going into sales management and not staying as an individual contributor." I said, "Well, my path, I'm not going to be a sales manager forever. My path is going to go like this. I'm going to be a director. I'm going to be a VP. I'm going to be an SVP. I'm going to go to early companies. I'm going to get equity, and I'm going to get a single, and then I'm going to get a double. And if I get one home run, my income and net worth will generationally change the game and squash your $500,000, $600,000 salary." So again, it goes back to like, what does somebody want to do? If you want to just be an individual contributor like that, I don't know that you need to work on your brand. If you want to be entrepreneurial, go this kind of leadership route, maybe you do. To Richard's point, it depends what you're.
There's no one right or wrong. I'm with you. There's no one right or wrong answer. I had this great mentor I keep using past tense. It's because I'm getting long in the tooth, I guess. But his name is Kevin Volpe, and he gave me this framework, which he admittedly ripped off from someone else. And a lot of the like leadership gurus have stuff like this. It's basically there's no one dimension of success, right? It's not just about financial success. There's 7 dimensions of success. It's career, family, financial, intellectual, social, spiritual, and then health, physical and mental health. And like life is about going in and out, literally in and out of success on those 7 dimensions. It's very, very rare that all 7 are aligned at one time. And, people it's not a balance. It's like people are optimizing in different areas like that. Some people might care more about spiritual and some people might care less. Yeah. Some people might care more about social. Some people might care less. So, I think that's a function, right? Is if you are and there's nothing wrong, right? Especially in sales, right? If you're incredibly driven to build financial foundation, I'm with you. Like, yeah, in the long term, you're better off being a CRO. You're better off probably ultimately trying to take some at bats at high growth venture backed startups and so on. And some, but not everyone has to. My point is like, I'm trying to liberate people that if they don't feel that way, then it's okay. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to give them psychological comfort that just because their path is not the path that is celebrated in the press doesn't make their path the wrong path.
Fully support that.
Totally agree. So I was waiting for Scott to agree first.
I do agree with that.
No.
I don't think we're saying anything that different.
Lost you there, Scott. What was the last thing you said?
I don't think we're in disagreement, actually. I think we're sort of saying the same thing, just in different ways.
I'm making like a fake Twitter war.
You should have talked to Scott years ago. He actually had a site called Twitter Wars and was going to have people battle it out. Yeah. So that was one of his which I thought was genius. It just didn't work. So anyway, we got to the end, my man. This has been fascinating. So again, Jeremy, thanks for joining us and sharing a ridiculous amount of insights and all these little things that matter, that add up to big things. So we really, really appreciate it. Shout out obviously to our sponsors of Salesforce Revenue Cloud, Lead 411 and Gong.io. And sort of our last question, Jeremy, is always, what can we do for you? What questions do you have for us?
This is a blast, by the way, and we scratched the surface on things. So I almost wish we had more time to dig deeper. But I'll turn the question around for you that you kind of hit for me, which was, hey, Jeremy, you should go start like this RevOps tech company. If you guys weren't doing what you're doing, if a VC gave you a big pile of money, what sales or revenue tech company would you start?
I'm not allowed to mention it. No, I'm just kidding. Did you sign an NDA? What kind would I solve? Honestly,
go ahead, Richard. No, go ahead.
Okay. I think I wouldn't be so, I don't know the right word. I'm not so arrogant as to know exactly what the market needs right now or enough of a prognosticator. I think what I would do is I'd go to Kyle and I'd go to Manny, and I'd go to Amit, and I'd go to all these folks who are building these amazing sales technology platforms. And I'd say, what's like in your product queue that you're not going to get the next couple of years? What do you need? What would you wish was in your suite of products? And then, I'd Venn diagram it, and whatever would hit right in the middle, I think I'd go build that.
That's assuming they would do it. So I would do that in a different way. I'd find the Jeremys of the world, and I'd try to create, for lack of a better phrase, an incubator space where you bring in the people who are smarter than you to say, hey, I've got this idea. And there's, KD, I know, has an idea that he's working on, and I know someone else has an idea, and say, okay, look, we can now fund these things in a way where it's almost, it's almost like an internal VC, but it's an incubator too, right? Where you bring in the smart people.
You just created Google Ventures, Richard. You're going to shit on my idea. You just created Google Ventures. I'm shitting on your idea now.
That's fine. Call it whatever you want. I don't care. So, but what, they can't be more than one of them? Like, like to your point, everybody Google Ventures can't get to everything, right? That's what you just said.
Right.
So that's what I would try to do, because I don't think I'm not in the weeds enough to know the answer to that question, right? I've been consulting for 8 or 9 years. And so for me, I could look at a couple of things around training and trying to improve those things and stuff like that. But I also know my wheelhouse is not that creator, right? Like Scott knows this about me. Scott, I'm much more like the executioner, go get these things done. I check shit off the list. Scott's the strategy guy, right? And so that's how I would do it. So whose advice are you going to take?
Jeremy?
I think, right. I mean, I think they're both great ideas. I mean, the other one is like, sometimes I'll ask people this question, and there's so much that's been built. The next play might be just, if truly unlimited money, is just put a whole bunch of companies together, like Zoom Info plus Salesloft plus Clary plus Gong plus whatever, like just roll all this stuff together. It's time.
Yeah, it's sort of a consolidate. I mean, that's what Salesforce tries to do, right? They do it at a super high level. So, but that's kind of what I think, right? It's, Scott, you've even had this idea.
We got to put them in there.
You've had a similar idea to mine. What did you call it? You were going to get everybody to.
I can't remember now, Richard. That was probably all of my best ideas come after I've had 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And then they're
what did you call it? Not a cohort, but like, I don't know, some mafioso name or something like that. I don't know. So
syndicate.
Jeremy.
Anyway, so Jeremy, thank you so much. We appreciate it. And a massively fun conversation that flew by. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you guys.
Cheers.